The text message arrived at 2:47 a.m. I wasn't supposed to see it. Sophie's phone lit up on the nightstand, buzzing against the wood with that insistent vibration that pulls you from sleep. I reached for it instinctively, thinking it was mine, and saw the preview on her locked screen. Can't stop thinking about yesterday. You're incredible. See. My hand froze. The phone went dark again. I lay there in the blackness of our bedroom, listening to Sophie's steady breathing beside me, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not panic. Not yet. Just a quiet, creeping awareness that the life I'd been living for the past 10 years might be built on sand. I'm Mark Harris, 42 years old, senior analyst at a tech company in the city, married to Sophie for a decade. We had the kind of marriage that looks good from the outside, nice apartment, decent income, the occasional weekend trip. But somewhere along the way, we'd stopped being partners and started being roommates who shared a bed. I didn't go back to sleep that night. Instead, I stared at the ceiling and thought about the past few months. Sophie's late nights at the office, her sudden interest in her appearance, new clothes, a gym membership she actually used, that expensive haircut, the way she angled her phone away when she texted. Small things, easy to dismiss individually. But together, they formed a pattern. When morning came, Sophie was already up, showering. I grabbed her phone from the nightstand. My hands weren't shaking. I was surprised by that. I tried her birthday, nothing. Our anniversary, nothing. Then, almost as a joke, I tried 000. The phone unlocked. I had maybe 3 minutes before the water shut off. I opened her messages and scrolled. Most were work-related, boring. Then I found it. A thread with CD that made my stomach turn. The messages went back 2 months. Nothing explicitly sexual, but the intimacy was unmistakable. Inside jokes, late-night conversations, references to our spot and last time. And yesterday's message, the one that had woken me up, was the most recent in a long chain. I took screenshots with my own phone, fingers moving on autopilot, and put everything back exactly as I'd found it. The shower shut off. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, tying my shoes, when Sophie emerged wrapped in a towel. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep." I kept my voice normal even. "Big meeting today." She nodded, already distracted, checking her phone. Her face showed nothing. No guilt, no worry. She smiled at whatever she was reading, and that smile, that private, happy smile, hurt more than anything else. "I'm grabbing coffee on the way in," I said, standing. "Want anything?" "I'm good." She didn't look up. I left our apartment and walked to the subway in the gray dawn light, my mind racing. CD. Chris Daniels. I knew that name. Sophie had mentioned him exactly once, years ago when we'd been dating. Her college boyfriend, the one she'd been serious about before they'd drifted apart after graduation. At work, I couldn't focus. I sat in my cubicle and opened my laptop, pulling up the screenshots. I read them again, looking for something I'd missed, some innocent explanation, but there wasn't one. The evidence was clear, even if it wasn't explicit. "You look like hell." I looked up. Sarah Chen stood beside my desk, holding 2 coffees. She was a colleague, someone I'd worked with on a few projects. Smart, observant, and blunt in a way I appreciated. "Rough night," I said. She set 1 coffee in front of me. "Want to talk about it?" "Not really." "Okay." She started to walk away, then stopped. "But if you do, I'm around. And Mark, whatever it is, you should probably deal with it before it deals with you." I watched her go, then looked back at my phone. She was right. I couldn't just sit on this, but I also couldn't confront Sophie without knowing the full scope. If I was wrong, if there was somehow an innocent explanation, I'd destroy what little we had left. And if I was right, I needed to be prepared. That evening, Sophie came home late again. 9:30. She had Thai food in a takeout bag and barely looked at me as she kicked off her heels. Rough day? I asked from the couch. Exhausting. She headed for the kitchen, pulling containers from the bag. Jenkins is being impossible about the Patterson account. I might have to fly out to Denver next week to smooth things over. Denver. I filed that away. Want company? I could take a few days off? She looked at me like I'd suggested joining a circus. To Denver? For a work trip? Mark, that's sweet, but I'll be in meetings the whole time. Right, of course. We ate in silence, her scrolling through her phone, me pretending to watch TV. This was our life now. Two strangers sharing space. When had it happened? When had we stopped talking, stopped caring, stopped trying? Later, in bed, I waited until Sophie was asleep before I took her phone again. More messages with CD, plans for next weekend at the usual place. A reference to a hotel I didn't recognize. And then, buried in the thread, something that made my blood run cold. Your husband suspects anything? Mark, God no, he's completely oblivious. It's actually kind of sad. I put the phone down carefully, my hands finally shaking. Not just the affair, the contempt, the casual dismissal. I was a joke to her, an obstacle to work around. I didn't sleep that night either. Instead, I lay in the darkness and planned. The next morning, I called in sick and drove to a small investigator's office in Queens. The place was above a dry cleaner, accessed by a narrow staircase that smelled like chemicals and old carpet. Tom Kowalski's office was exactly what I expected. Cluttered desk, filing cabinets, a single window looking out at a brick wall. Tom himself was in his 50s, heavy-set, with the weary eyes of someone who'd seen too many marriages fall apart. Cheating spouse? He asked before I'd even sat down. That obvious? You'd be surprised how many guys sit in that chair with the same look on their face. He pulled out a form. Tell me what you've got. I showed him the screenshots. He studied them, nodding slowly. CD is Chris Daniels, her college ex. They've been seeing each other for at least 2 months, maybe longer. She's planning to go to Denver next week, but I don't think there's actually a work trip. Tom made notes. You want surveillance? Yes. Everything. Where she goes, who she meets, how often. I want photographs, receipts, anything that'll hold up. This isn't cheap. I don't care what it costs. My voice came out harder than I intended. I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with before I make my next move. He quoted me a price. I wrote a check from my personal account, the one Sophie didn't have access to. Tom promised to start immediately. One more thing, I said. Can you find out about this guy? Chris Daniels. Where he works, where he lives, his situation. Looking to confront him? Maybe. I haven't decided yet. Tom leaned back in his chair. Piece of advice? Don't. Confronting the other guy never goes how you think it will. You end up looking like the crazy husband, and they get to play victim. Better to use the information strategically. Strategically how? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's up to you. But knowledge is power, Mr. Harris. The more you know, the more options you have. I left feeling strange, not better exactly, but purposeful. For the first time in months, I had a plan. I wasn't just reacting, I was taking control. Over the next week, I watched Sophie like a scientist observing a specimen. I cataloged her lies. Tuesday night, she said she was working late, but Tom sent me photos of her at an expensive Italian restaurant downtown with Chris Daniels. He was exactly what I expected. Tall, well-dressed, the kind of guy who probably used product in his hair. They sat close, touching hands across the table, laughing. Thursday, Sophie told me she had a client dinner. Tom's photos showed her entering Chris's apartment building at 8 p.m. and not leaving until after midnight. Saturday, while I was supposedly at the gym, Tom followed them to a hotel in Connecticut. The photos from that day were the worst. Sophie in Chris's car, her head on his shoulder, the two of them checking into a boutique hotel, the kind with a fireplace in every room. Sophie's face in those pictures. She looked happy. Really happy. More alive than I'd seen her in years. When she came home that night, claiming she'd been at a spa day with her friend Jennifer, I almost broke. Almost threw the photos in her face and demanded an explanation. But I didn't. Instead, I hugged her and asked if she felt relaxed. "So much better," she said, kissing my cheek. I really needed that. The lies were so easy for her. That's what shocked me most. No hesitation, no guilt, just smooth, practiced deception. Monday morning, Tom called. "Got something interesting. Chris Daniels works in finance, makes good money, divorced 6 months ago, no kids, lives alone in a condo in Tribeca. And here's the kicker. He's been borrowing money. Lots of it. Looks like the divorce cleaned him out." "How much borrowing?" "Enough that he's probably feeling desperate. Personal loans, credit cards maxed out. He's living beyond his means, trying to maintain an image." I thought about that. "So he's vulnerable." "Very. If you wanted to apply pressure, that's where you do it." I thanked Tom and hung up. Then I sat at my desk and thought about what I was becoming. A week ago, I'd been a guy trying to save his marriage. Now I was collecting intelligence like I was planning a military operation. But Sophie had made her choice. She'd chosen lies and betrayal and contempt. She'd chosen to make me the fool. I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. That night, Sophie made her announcement. We were having dinner, takeout again, because neither of us cooked anymore, when she said it. "I'm inviting Chris to the company Christmas party." I looked up from my pad thai. "Chris?" "Daniels, from college. We've reconnected recently, professionally." She said it casually, like it meant nothing. "He's in a similar field, and I thought it would be good networking." "Your ex-boyfriend?" "That was 15 years ago, Mark. We're adults now." She gave me a look that was half challenge, half contempt. "A secure husband would understand. It's a trust test." The words hung in the air. A trust test. Like I was the one who needed to prove something. Like I was the problem in this marriage. "Sure," I said, keeping my voice light. "Sounds like an ideal event to build trust." She didn't catch the sarcasm, or maybe she did and just didn't care. She smiled and went back to her phone, already texting someone. Probably Chris, telling him I'd agreed, telling him what an idiot I was. I finished my dinner and excused myself. In our bedroom, I pulled out my laptop and opened a new document. At the top, I typed, "Plan." Then I started writing. The Christmas party was 2 weeks away. That gave me time to prepare. I called Tom and told him to intensify surveillance. I wanted to know every time Sophie and Chris met, every text, every call if possible. He promised to get me detailed reports. Meanwhile, I started working on Chris. Tom had given me his office address, a financial services firm in Midtown. I took a long lunch and sat in the coffee shop across the street, watching people come and go. Chris emerged around 1 p.m., walking with 2 other guys in suits. He was laughing, confident, the kind of guy who'd always had things easy. I followed at a distance as they went to a lunch spot nearby. When they'd settled in, I walked past their table, slowing just enough to hear snippets of conversation. Chris was talking about a deal, sounding important, using financial jargon to impress his colleagues. But I knew what Tom had told me. Chris was broke. This was all performance. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I created a fake email account and sent Chris a message. "Mr. Daniels, I represent a party interested in your financial situation. We're aware of your recent difficulties and would like to discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement. Please respond at your earliest convenience. Regards." I didn't expect a response. It was a test, a way to rattle him. But the next morning, there was a reply. "Who is this? What arrangement?" I smiled. He'd taken the bait. I didn't respond. Let him wonder. Let him worry. At home, Sophie was increasingly distracted. She'd started working out more, buying new clothes, spending hours on her appearance. All for Chris, obviously. I watched her transform herself and felt nothing. The woman I'd married was gone. This person wearing her face was a stranger. "You look nice," I said one morning as she applied makeup. "Thanks." She didn't meet my eyes in the mirror. "Big presentation today." "Right. Good luck." After she left, I went through her closet. Hidden in the back, behind winter coats, I found a shopping bag from an expensive lingerie store. The receipt was inside. $300, purchased last week. I'd never seen any of these items. They weren't for me. I took photos of everything and put it all back exactly as I'd found it. At work, Sarah cornered me in the break room. "Okay, you've been weird for 2 weeks. What's going on?" I considered lying, but I was tired of lies. "Sophie's having an affair." Sarah's expression shifted from concern to anger in a heartbeat. "You're sure?" "I have surveillance photos, text messages, credit card receipts. She's been seeing her college ex for at least 2 months. "Jesus, Mark, I'm so sorry." She touched my arm. "What are you going to do?" "I'm not sure yet, but I'm not confronting her until I have all the information." "Smart. Do you need help? With anything?" I looked at her, this colleague who'd become something like a friend. "Actually, yes. You know people in HR, right?" "Some. Why?" "Sophie works in our division. If things get messy, I might need someone I can trust to have my back." Sarah nodded slowly. "Consider it done. And Mark, don't let her gaslight you. Whatever she says when you confront her, remember what you know." I took her advice to heart. That afternoon, I compiled everything I had into a folder on my laptop. Photos from Tom, screenshots of messages, credit card statements showing charges at hotels and restaurants, flight bookings to places Sophie claimed were work trips. I organized it all chronologically, building a timeline of the affair. It was damning, irrefutable, and it was mine. Tom called that evening with an update. "They're escalating. Met 3 times this week. Yesterday I followed them to a jewelry store in Soho. Chris was looking at rings." My stomach dropped. "Engagement rings?" "Looked like it. Nothing purchased, but they were definitely browsing." So that was the plan. Sophie wasn't just having an affair. She was planning her exit. She'd leave me for Chris once she had everything arranged. Probably file for divorce, take half of everything, and ride off into the sunset with her college sweetheart. Except Chris was broke. She didn't know that yet. Or maybe she did and didn't care. Either way, I wasn't going to let it happen on her terms. That night, Sophie came home humming. Actually humming. She set her bag down and smiled at me, the first genuine smile I'd seen in months. "Good day?" I asked. "Great day. Things are really coming together." She meant Chris, obviously. Their plans, their future. "Hey," I was thinking. "For the party next week we should go together, arrive together, I mean, as a couple." "Sure, that makes sense." "And you'll be nice to Chris? I want him to feel welcome." I looked at my wife, this woman who was sleeping with another man while asking me to make him feel welcome, and I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. Not anger, not anymore. Something worse. A kind of calculating calm. "Of course," I said. "I'll be the perfect host." She kissed my cheek and headed for the shower, still humming. I watched her go and thought about the Christmas party, about Chris Daniels, with his fake confidence and mounting debts, about Sophie, so sure of herself, so certain she'd gotten away with it. They had no idea what was coming. The week before the party, I made my preparations. I met with a divorce lawyer, a shark recommended by Tom, a woman named Patricia Liu, who had a reputation for destroying unfaithful spouses in court. "New York is a no-fault state," she explained, "but infidelity still matters when it comes to settlement negotiations. The evidence you have is excellent. Photos, messages, financial records. If we play this right, she won't get half of anything." "I want her to get nothing," I said. Patricia smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Let's see what we can do. We discussed strategy, the joint accounts, the apartment we owned together, Sophie's car that was in my name. I'd been the primary earner for most of our marriage. Sophie made good money, but I'd paid for almost everything. The down payment on the apartment, the renovations, even her car. In the excitement of marriage, I'd put her name on everything to show I trusted her. That trust was about to cost her dearly. Don't confront her yet, Patricia advised. Wait until after the holidays. Give her enough rope to hang herself. The more evidence we have, the stronger our position. But I had other plans. I wasn't just after a financial settlement. I wanted Sophie to feel what I'd felt, the betrayal, the humiliation, the slow, creeping realization that everything she thought was solid was actually built on sand. The day of the Christmas party, I took a personal day and met with Tom one more time. He handed me a USB drive. Everything's on here, photos, videos, timeline. There's also some interesting stuff about Daniels, bank statements, loan documents. He's in worse shape than I thought. He owes money to some not-so-nice people. How not so nice? The kind who break legs when you don't pay. He's playing with fire, and your wife has no idea. I pocketed the USB drive. Perfect. One more thing. I need you at the party tonight. As a guest. Can you manage that? Tom raised an eyebrow. What are you planning? Insurance. If things go sideways, I want a witness who's not emotionally involved. He agreed, and I gave him the details. Then I went home to prepare. Sophie was already getting ready, standing in our bedroom in the expensive lingerie I'd found hidden in her closet. For a moment, I saw her as I used to. Beautiful, confident, the woman I'd fallen in love with. Then she turned and smiled at me, and all I saw was a stranger. You should start getting ready, she said. I want to be there early. To see Chris? Her smile faltered. To network. This is a work event, Mark. Right. Of course. I showered and dressed in my best suit, the navy one Sophie had bought me for my birthday. In the mirror, I looked like a different person, harder, older. The past few weeks had changed me in ways I was still understanding. We took a cab to the venue, a nice hotel ballroom downtown, decorated with tasteful Christmas lights and a massive tree. The party was already underway, colleagues mingling with drinks, soft jazz playing in the background. Sophie's hand was on my arm as we entered, the picture of a happy couple. Then I saw Chris. He was standing by the bar, drink in hand, and when Sophie spotted him, her entire face lit up. She actually gasped, like she was surprised to see him, even though this whole thing had been her idea. Chris! She waved, pulling me toward him. Mark, this is Chris Daniels. Chris, my husband, Mark. We shook hands. His grip was firm, his smile confident. Great to finally meet you, Mark. Sophie talks about you all the time. Funny, I said, returning his smile. She's mentioned you too, though not nearly as much as she should have. Sophie shot me a look, but Chris laughed it off. Well, we go way back, college sweethearts, you know how it is. I do now. The evening proceeded exactly as Sophie had planned. She and Chris gravitated toward each other, talking and laughing while I made the rounds, greeting colleagues. But I was watching, always watching, the way they stood too close, how Chris's hand lingered on her lower back, the private jokes and shared glances. At one point, I saw them slip out onto the balcony together. I gave them 5 minutes, then followed. They were standing close, Sophie's hand on Chris's chest, his arm around her waist. They didn't hear me approach. This is too risky, Sophie was saying. Mark's here. He's oblivious, Chris replied. You said so yourself. Besides, after the holidays, you'll tell him, then we can be together properly. I know, Evening, I said, stepping into the light. They jumped apart like teenagers caught by a parent. Sophie's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Shock, fear, then forced casualness. Mark! We were just getting some air. I can see that. I looked at Chris. Mind if I borrow my wife for a dance? They're playing her favorite song. It wasn't true. I had no idea what song was playing, but Sophie couldn't refuse without making things weird. Chris nodded, his confidence cracking slightly, and Sophie took my arm. On the dance floor, she was tense in my arms. That was awkward. Was it? I thought we were all just having a nice time. I pulled her closer. He seems nice. Chris. Very friendly. He's just being polite. Is that what we're calling it? She looked up at me, and for a second, I saw fear in her eyes. Real fear. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Just making conversation. I spun her slowly. You do seem happier lately, though. More alive. It's nice to see. I've just been feeling better. More like myself. That's good. Everyone should feel like themselves. I leaned close, my lips near her ear. Even if that means showing who they really are. The song ended. Sophie pulled away, her smile forced. I should check on Chris. Make sure he's not standing alone. Of course, can't have him feeling neglected. I watched her hurry back to him, whispering something urgent. Chris glanced at me, his expression no longer quite so confident. Good. Let them wonder. Let them worry. The rest of the party passed in a blur. I drank more than usual, played the jovial husband, made jokes that had people laughing. But all the while, I was gathering information. I talked to Sophie's colleagues, mentioning offhand how many business trips she'd been taking. I casually brought up trust in relationships, how important honesty was, planting seeds. By the end of the night, Sophie was exhausted and anxious. In the cab home, she kept checking her phone, texting rapidly. Everything okay? I asked. Fine. Just work stuff. At 11 p.m. on a Friday, it never stops. At home, she went straight to bed, claiming a headache. I sat in the living room with a drink and pulled out my laptop. The USB drive Tom had given me was full of damning evidence. Photos of Sophie and Chris together, timestamps showing when they'd met, everything I needed to destroy her. But I wasn't ready yet. Not quite. The party had been step 1. Now came step 2. Monday morning, I called Chris's office. The receptionist put me through to his voicemail. I left a simple message. Mr. Daniels, this is Mark Harris, Sophie's husband. I think we should talk. Man to man. Call me. I gave my number and hung up. Then I went to work and waited. He called at lunch. What do you want? Like I said, to talk. There's a bar near your office, McSorley's. Meet me there at 6. I don't think... 6 o'clock, Chris. Be there, or I'll come to your office. Your choice. He showed up at 6:15, looking nervous. I was already at a table in the back, 2 beers waiting. He sat down slowly, like the chair might explode. What is this about? He asked. You know what it's about. I pushed a beer toward him. How long have you been sleeping with my wife? He paled. I don't know what you... Don't. I held up a hand. Don't insult me. I know everything. The hotels, the trips, the late-night texts. I know about the jewelry store in Soho. I know you're planning a future together. Chris took a long drink, his hand shaking. So what? You're going to hit me? Threaten me? No. I'm going to give you some advice. I leaned forward. Sophie doesn't know you're broke, does she? His face confirmed it. That's none of your... She thinks you're successful, well off, a safe bet for her next chapter. I smiled. But you're drowning in debt. The divorce cleaned you out. You're borrowing from dangerous people just to keep up appearances. How long before it all comes crashing down? You don't know anything about my finances. I know everything about your finances, down to the last maxed-out credit card. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo, one of his loan documents. You owe $60,000 to Petrov. That's not a name you want to owe money to. Chris stared at the photo, then at me. How did you get that? Doesn't matter. What matters is that Sophie thinks she's trading up, but she's actually trading for a guy who's one bad month away from having his legs broken. I put the phone away. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to end things with Sophie, tonight. Tell her it was a mistake, that you got caught up, whatever. But you're done. And if I don't? Then I'll make sure everyone knows about your debt, your employer, your creditors, and especially Sophie. I'll destroy what's left of your reputation, and you'll lose her anyway. This way, you at least walk away with your dignity. We sat in silence. Chris finished his beer, then mine. Finally, he spoke. You're a cold son of a bah. I learned from the best. I stood. 48 hours, Chris. End it, or I will. I left him sitting there and walked out into the cold December night. My phone buzzed, a text from Sophie. Working late. Don't wait up. I smiled. She had no idea that her perfect plan was already falling apart. The next day, Tom called with an update. Your boy Chris met with Sophie last night. Coffee shop in Chelsea. Looked intense. She was crying when she left. Good. You really twisted the knife with him, huh? He needed motivation. But Sophie didn't mention it. She came home that night acting normal, maybe a little quiet. I played along, asking about her day, pretending nothing had changed. But I could see the cracks forming. She was distracted, anxious, checking her phone constantly. By Wednesday, things came to a head. Sophie came home early, her face blotchy from crying. I was on the couch, pretending to read. Mark, we need to talk. I looked up, all innocent concern. What's wrong? She sat down heavily. I made a mistake, a big one. What kind of mistake? I've been seeing someone, Chris, from college. She wouldn't meet my eyes. It wasn't serious, just a stupid thing. But it's over now. He ended it yesterday. I let the silence stretch out. Then, how long? A couple months. I'm so sorry, Mark. I don't know what I was thinking. 2 months. While you were sleeping in my bed, eating meals I paid for, living in an apartment I bought. My voice stayed calm, even. 2 months of lies. I know. I'm awful. But it's over now. We can move past this, right? Go to counseling? She actually thought that would work. That she could confess to a sanitized version of the affair, blame Chris for ending it, and I'd just forgive her. The arrogance was breathtaking. Why did he end it? I asked. What? Chris, why did he end things? You two seemed pretty serious at the party. She fumbled for an answer. He said it was too complicated, that he wasn't ready for something real. Right. It had nothing to do with his debt, or the fact that he's being threatened by loan sharks. Her eyes widened. How do you... I know everything, Sophie. I've known for weeks. I stood up, pulling out my phone. The hotels, the trips, the $300 lingerie you bought for him, the apartment in Tribeca where you spent the night while telling me you were at a spa. I showed her a photo from Tom's surveillance, her and Chris in his car, her head on his shoulder. I know about all of it. She went white. You've been spying on me? Protecting myself. There's a difference. This is insane. You're insane. No, I'm informed. There's a difference. I sat back down, utterly calm. Chris didn't end things because he wanted to. He ended them because I told him to. I showed him what I knew about his finances and gave him a choice. Walk away, or I'd destroy what's left of his life. Sophie stood up, shaking. You had no right. I had every right. You're my wife. You took vows. Remember those? For better or worse? Forsaking all others? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. But you threw that away for a broke con artist who was using you just as much as you were using him. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. You were bored with your boring husband and your boring life, so you went looking for excitement. And Chris saw an opportunity, a woman with money who could help him out of his hole. I stood again, walking toward her. You both thought you were so smart, so careful, but you weren't. You were sloppy and arrogant, and now you're caught. She was crying now, real tears. Mark, please, I'm sorry. I'll do anything. We can fix this. No, we can't. I pulled out an envelope and handed it to her. Divorce papers. You're being served tomorrow, but I wanted to give you a heads up. Professional courtesy. She opened the envelope with shaking hands, scanning the pages. You're taking everything. Not everything. You'll get what you brought into the marriage, minus the cost of your affair. The hotels, the restaurants, the trips, all that came out of our joint accounts. I'm billing you for half. That's not legal. It's completely legal. Check with your lawyer. I headed for the door. I'll be staying at a hotel for a few days. You should find somewhere else to live. The apartment's mine. My name's on the deed. I paid for it. You have until the end of the month. Mark, please! She grabbed my arm. Don't do this. I love you. I looked at her hand on my arm, then at her face. No, you don't. You never did. You loved what I provided. The security, the stability, the comfortable life. But you didn't love me. I pulled my arm free. And the really sad thing? I actually loved you. The person I thought you were. But that person never existed. I left her standing in our living room, crying. In the hallway, I paused for just a moment, listening to her sobs. Then I kept walking. The divorce was brutal. Sophie hired a lawyer who tried to paint me as a controlling, abusive husband. They claimed I'd been spying on her, invading her privacy, psychologically tormenting her. Patricia Liu tore those arguments apart in court with cold precision. My client gathered evidence of infidelity to protect his financial interests, she said. If anything, Ms. Harris's actions, the lies, the secret credit card charges, the affair conducted in hotels paid for with marital funds, constitute financial abuse. The judge agreed. In the end, Sophie got almost nothing. The apartment was mine. Our savings were mine. Even her car, which I'd paid for, reverted to me. She was left with her personal belongings and the debt from her affair. Chris Daniels disappeared from the picture entirely. Last I heard from Tom, he'd left the city, running from his creditors. Sophie tried to contact him, but his phone was disconnected. Her knight in shining armor had turned out to be a coward after all. Through Sarah, I heard the office gossip. Sophie had become a pariah. People who'd once admired her now saw her as dishonest, someone who'd betrayed trust. Her career suffered, projects were reassigned, promotions passed her by. She'd built her professional reputation on being trustworthy and polished, and I'd systematically dismantled both. I should have felt satisfied, victorious. But mostly, I felt empty. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Sophie at a coffee shop near our old apartment. She looked different, thinner, older, worn down. She was wearing clothes I didn't recognize, cheaper than what she used to buy. Her hair needed cutting. Mark, she said, her voice small. Sophie. We stood there awkwardly. Finally, she spoke. I lost my job. They said it was downsizing, but we both know why. I didn't respond. I'm living with my sister in Jersey, taking contract work where I can find it. She laughed, a broken sound. You really destroyed me. Everything I had, everything I built. Gone. You destroyed yourself, I said quietly. I just made sure there were consequences. Was it worth it? All this revenge? I thought about that question. Was it worth it? I had the apartment, the money, the satisfaction of winning. But I'd also lost 10 years of my life to a relationship that had been a lie. I'd turned myself into someone cold and calculating, someone who could manipulate and scheme without remorse. I don't know, I admitted, but it was necessary. She nodded slowly. I did love you, you know, at the beginning, before everything got so complicated. Maybe. But love isn't enough when you don't respect someone. And you never respected me, Sophie. I was just the stable choice, the safe bet, until I wasn't enough anymore. You're right. She looked down at her coffee. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I'm genuinely sorry. It's worth something, but it doesn't change anything. She left, and I watched her go. The woman who'd once been my wife, now a stranger living a different life. Part of me wanted to feel triumph, but all I felt was tired. 6 months after the divorce, I was having drinks with Sarah after work. We'd become actual friends through the whole ordeal, and she'd been a constant source of support. "You seem different lately," she said, nursing her whiskey. "Lighter, maybe." "I'm learning to be alone. It's not so bad." "Have you thought about dating again?" "Not really. I don't think I trust people the way I used to." She nodded. "Sophie really did a number on you." "We did a number on each other." I finished my drink. I'm not proud of everything I did. The manipulation, the scheming, that's not who I want to be. You were protecting yourself. Was I? Or was I just getting revenge? I signaled for another round. There's a difference, you know. Protection is defensive. What I did was offensive, calculated. I wanted Sophie to suffer, and I made sure she did. She deserved it. Maybe. But that doesn't mean I should have been the one to deliver it. I looked at Sarah. You know what the worst part is? I'm not sure I'd do anything differently. Given the same situation, the same information, I think I'd make all the same choices. That doesn't make you a bad person, Mark. It makes you human. We sat in silence for a while. Then Sarah asked, "What about Chris? Ever hear what happened to him?" Tom told me he left the state, probably still running from his debts. Sophie tried to find him after the divorce, but he'd vanished completely. Turns out, when things got hard, he didn't want her any more than he'd wanted his ex-wife. Karma's Yeah, I smiled. It really is. The next week, I got an unexpected email from Chris Daniels. Mark. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I don't blame you, but I wanted you to know that what happened with Sophie was the biggest mistake of my life. Not because I got caught, but because I hurt someone who didn't deserve it. You were right about everything. I was broke, desperate, using Sophie as much as she was using me. When you confronted me, I was angry, but you did me a favor. You showed me who I'd become, a coward and a user. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just saying I'm sorry, for what it's worth. Chris. I read it twice, then deleted it. Apologies didn't change the past. They didn't undo the lies or the betrayal or the pain. But maybe they were a start toward something. Not forgiveness, exactly. Just acceptance that people were flawed and messy and complicated. That night, I sat in my apartment now, not ours, and thought about the past year. The discovery, the investigation, the revenge, the systematic destruction of Sophie's life, and the cold satisfaction I'd felt watching it happen. I'd won. That was undeniable. But the victory felt hollow. A year after the divorce, I sold the apartment. Too many ghosts, too many memories. I bought a smaller place downtown, something that was entirely mine, with no history attached. Sarah helped me move. As we unpacked boxes in the new kitchen, she said, "This is good, a fresh start." That's the idea. Have you talked to Sophie recently? No, not since that day at the coffee shop. I opened a box of dishes. I heard she moved out of state, started over somewhere new. Do you think she's okay? I thought about that. I think she's surviving. That's about all any of us can do after something like this. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then, "Can I ask you something? Do you regret it? The revenge?" "I regret needing it. I regret being the kind of person who could do what I did." I set down a plate. "But I don't regret defending myself. Sophie made her choices. I just made sure she faced the consequences." "That's fair." We finished unpacking in silence. Later, sitting on my new couch in my new living room, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not happiness, exactly, but the absence of anger, which was almost the same thing. My phone buzzed. A text from Tom. "Saw your ex the other day. Thought you'd want to know. She looks okay. Thin, but okay." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "Thanks for letting me know." That was all. No follow-up questions, no desire to know more. Sophie was part of my past, and I was finally ready to leave her there. 2 years after the divorce, I was different. Still Mark Harris, but a version that had been forged in fire. I was harder, more cautious, less willing to trust, but I was also free. I'd started dating again. Nothing serious, just casual dinners and movies. I wasn't ready for commitment, might never be ready for it again. And that was okay. Not everyone needed to be partnered to be complete. Work was good. I'd gotten a promotion, moved to a different division where Sophie's ghost didn't linger, made new friends, built a new life. The old life, the one with Sophie, with shared dreams and joint accounts and the illusion of forever, felt like it had happened to someone else. One evening, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Sophie. Mark. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I wouldn't blame you if you threw this away without reading it. But I need to say some things, even if you never respond. I'm living in Portland now, working as a consultant, rebuilding my career. It's been hard, harder than I ever imagined. But I'm making it work. I've been in therapy for the past year, dealing with everything that happened, trying to understand why I made the choices I did. My therapist says I was looking for validation, for proof that I was desirable and valuable. I put that burden on Chris instead of dealing with my own insecurities. None of that excuses what I did. Nothing excuses it. I betrayed you in the worst way possible, and you had every right to be angry. But what you did in return, the calculated destruction of my life, went beyond justice. It was cruelty. We both lost in this. You lost a wife and a decade of trust. I lost everything, and neither of us got what we really needed, which was honesty and communication before things fell apart. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm not even asking for a response. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Genuinely, deeply sorry. And I hope, wherever you are, that you found some peace. Sophie. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. Maybe someday I'd respond. Maybe I wouldn't. But she was right about one thing. We'd both lost. Victory had come at a cost I was still paying. That night, I dreamed about the beginning. When Sophie and I first met, young and hopeful, believing we'd found something real. In the dream, I tried to warn my younger self, but he couldn't hear me. He just kept walking toward her, smiling, unaware of what was coming. I woke up in the darkness of my new bedroom, in my new apartment, in my new life. And I realized something. I wouldn't go back and change things even if I could. The pain had made me stronger. The betrayal had made me wiser. The revenge had made me whole, even if it had also hollowed something out inside me. Sophie had tested my trust, and I'd failed the test by design. But I'd passed a different test, the test of my own strength. I'd proven I wouldn't be a victim. I wouldn't be the fool who got played and walked away with nothing. I'd made her pay, and she'd made me into someone new, someone harder, colder, more capable of cruelty than I'd ever imagined. In destroying her, I'd also destroyed parts of myself, the parts that believed in second chances and redemption and love conquering all. But maybe those parts needed to cross over. Maybe that naive, trusting man had to be burned away to reveal someone stronger underneath. Someone who understood that the world was full of Sophie Harris's and Chris Daniels's, people who would take and take until you stopped them. I'd stopped them. And in doing so, I'd stopped being the person I used to be. 3 years after the divorce, I was having dinner at a restaurant downtown when I saw her. Sophie, sitting at a table near the window with a man I didn't recognize. She looked good, healthy, put together, the way she used to look. She was laughing at something he said, her hand on his arm. For a moment, our eyes met. I saw surprise, then fear, then something like resignation. I nodded once, acknowledging her presence, and she nodded back. Then I looked away and returned to my meal. The man I'd become didn't need to confront her, didn't need to know if she was happy, or if this new relationship was real, or if she'd learned anything from our disaster. Her life was her own now, separate from mine, and I was content with that separation. When I left the restaurant, I walked past her table. She didn't look up. I didn't stop. We were strangers now. Two people who'd once shared a life and had systematically destroyed each other, trying to win a war neither of us should have been fighting. Outside, the city was alive with lights and noise and people living their lives. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing in the cold night air, and felt something close to gratitude, not for what had happened, but for what it had taught me. Trust was earned, not given. Love without respect was worthless. And sometimes, the person you married was a stranger wearing a familiar face. I'd learned those lessons the hard way, but I'd learned them. And I'd survived the learning. That was enough. I walked home through the crowded streets, past couples holding hands and families laughing together, past all the ordinary moments of ordinary lives, and I felt finally like I belonged to my own life again. Not the life I'd planned with Sophie, not the revenge fantasy I'd enacted, but something new and mine alone. The betrayal had broken me, the revenge had remade me, and the years since had taught me that both were necessary. You couldn't become who you needed to be without first destroying who you'd been. Sophie had given me that gift. Even if she'd never meant to, she'd shown me exactly how cruel people could be, how easily trust could be weaponized, how love could curdle into contempt. And in doing so, she'd forced me to become stronger, harder, more self-sufficient. I'd wanted to destroy her. And I had. But in the process, I'd also freed myself. From the illusion of our marriage, from the belief that I needed someone else to be complete, from the naive trust that had made me vulnerable in the first place. Standing in my apartment that night, looking out at the city lights, I realized I didn't hate Sophie anymore. I didn't love her either. I felt nothing at all when I thought about her, which was perhaps the greatest victory of all. She'd tested my trust and found it wanting, but I'd tested my strength and found it more than sufficient. I'd survived betrayal, enacted revenge, and lived to tell the tale, and that, in the end, was all that mattered. I closed the curtains and went to bed in my empty apartment, in my solitary life, and slept without dreaming,